This is the Surly Grognards for Monday, September 3, 2012. I'm Peter Bowman, and I'm joined here by my good friend and co-host, Eric Carlson. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
I'm all right. I have a sinus infection.
Ooh,
That's why I'm drinking this week.
as opposed to every other week.
Right.
Aha. So, this week we actually have we have a topic this week that we came up with last week at the end of the episode. So we've had a
You are
full week to
liars,
actually.
sir. That's impossible.
It's weird, isn't it? We actually
I know.
came into the weekend knowing what we were gonna do. Now, did this actually change how much we prepared for the show?
Absolutely not.
I gave it some thought over the weekend, but not a lot, I admit. Mostly because I knew roughly what I was going to talk about when we came up with the topic on Monday.
Right.
So we're going to talk about what we're talking about this week is we're going to be talking about combining genres in RPGs. Various ways you can combine different sort of typical big, well-known RPG genres in interesting and fun ways. We'll probably talk about a few systems that do it inherently, and then talk about some ideas that we might have and sort of riff off of those. As usual, if we have time at the end of the show, we will answer questions, either the ones that have been emailed to us during the week or ones that come up in the chat. If you have a question that you would like to ask us, like us to answer, you can either email us at surlygrognards@yahoo.com, or you can post it in the chat here during the live show. Either
Did
works
anyone
quite well.
actually send us any questions over the week?
That's a really good question, because I forgot to check. So while I'm checking to see whether we got any email questions, Eric, why don't you start off talking about sort of the concept of combining genres in an RPG, sort of a general sort of feel for it?
Well, traditionally, you are combining genres. I know that's really deep information there, but let me see how to. One of the best ways is ideally you take all the good stuff from genre A and combine it with all the good stuff from genre B and leave all the crap that neither of them do very well together. It's sort of a you got chocolate my peanut butter kind of deal. Or
Right.
I don't know, you got orange juice my vodka.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're definitely trying to achieve that whole sort of chocolate in your peanut butter, orange juice in your vodka combination that, at
Rhubarb and my
first,
strawberries.
what?
Rhubarb and my strawberries.
Yeah, exactly. Things that you might not think of ahead of time that might not occur to you as being good, but when you do it, it's better than either of them on their own.
Chocolate and my bacon, which is delicious if any of you haven't tried it. Go do it right now. Well, after this, but...
Please wait till after the show, but... So, yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's basically you're trying to combine the best elements of two genres, or taking a base genre and sort of salting in a little bit of some elements from another genre to influence the main genre, because you might not necessarily want to make it half and half. You might want to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
I've found that usually when you go straight up half and half, it doesn't work terribly well.
That's been my experience too, and most of the best sort of combo ones. I mean, like your favorite example, one of your favorite RPGs, Shadowrun, is a brilliant example of this.
Shadowrun
primarily
is basically cyberpunk with some fantasy elements added.
Right, exactly. So it's as Eric said there, it's primarily cyberpunk with a little bit of fantasy. I mean, well, magic is a little bit more oomphy than
Magic, depending on what edition of Shadowrun you're playing in, it varies between 3rd ed D&D, oh my god, and just really, really good.
Yeah, it doesn't drop below really good.
Yeah.
And that's probably where it should be, in all honesty. But
Probably.
That's not what we're really talking about. We're talking about taking some of the classic basic examples that I can come up with off the top of my head. We could start with talking about sort of taking a fantasy world and then sprinkling elements from other genres into it. Now, sometimes that won't work too well. Like, taking fantasy and sprinkling, well, actually, that's not entirely true. I was about to say taking fantasy, sprinkling a little bit of science fiction into it doesn't work too well, except that makes Star Wars.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, it's a fair bit of sci-fi, but there's a lot more fantasy in there than you think.
You know what? I'd say Star Wars is probably about a 50-50 mix.
Yeah, it really is.
And I think it's probably the only example of 50-50 mix that works that I can think of.
Well, honestly, it's actually more 45-45 with 10% samurai.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I'm talking about the original Star Wars movies, not the other stuff. The original trilogy.
There were no other ones. We're going Highlander here. There were no prequels.
What about the expanded universe?
Don't talk to me about the expanded universe.
Yay! Someone agrees with me. Yes, there are a few things that actually talking about Star Wars is probably not the best idea right now. Eric and I can go on for that for hours probably.
Yeah, easily.
So, but yeah, Star Wars is a great example of combining two genres into it. There are definitely elements of fantasy. I mean, it's space opera at its best, and that's sort of what space opera is. It's combining certain elements of fantasy without the magic, really. The magic, really, in sort of space opera is more the technology.
Well, in Star Wars, you actually do have magic in the form of the Force. I mean, Palpatine throws lightning bolts out of his fingertips.
But even ignoring that, the technology in Star Wars is never explained.
That's true.
And because it doesn't make any goddamn sense if you try to think about it. And that's fine as long as you just sort of say, yeah, how does it work? Very well, thank you. You don't explain it, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
That's what space opera is really about. It's not about the technology doesn't need to be hard, actual realistic scientifically. As long as it's internally consistent and you don't really try to explain it, it works. And then you sort of take a lot of the attitudes of high fantasy, throw in the wild numbers of non-human races.
Right, because you got Rhodians and space orcs. I forget what they're called, but they're definitely space orcs.
Oh god,
Gamorreans,
yes. The Wookiees. All that.
Yeah. Space aliens.
It's a prime example of a combined genre, and it's I love it dearly. The original Star Wars trilogy is still one of my favorite sets of movies of all time. And honestly, I've had a lot of fun playing Star Wars RPGs, even if the systems aren't really ideal for Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is honestly setting the Star Wars campaign during the movies, the original trilogy, is a lot of fun to play during that time period.
It really is, because it's when things are interesting. To use an old Chinese proverb.
Yeah. Well, additionally, there's a lot of room for the PCs to do important things that aren't covered on the screen, because there's a lot of important stuff that happened that isn't covered on the story of Luke, Han, and Leia.
It's true. There's a whole bit with developing the B-Wing fighter, and oh my god, I just scored major nerd points.
I've played that adventure. I played that Star Wars D6 West End Game Star Wars adventure.
That's an adventure? That's awesome.
There's an adventure about it, yes. About getting Admiral Akbar out of the trap that the Imperials set to actually take out the B-Wing project.
Does he yell, "It's a trap"?
I don't remember, but it was awesome.
I
think Joey had him say that. My friend Joey was running that game. It was fantastic. It was awesome. At the time Lieutenant Akbar. It's actually a really fun adventure. You basically have to get in there. I think the Verpine are there also. They're sort of an insectoid race that are very good at technology.
That you never ever see on screen.
No, but they're mentioned in the books, and they're actually kind of cool. But anyways, so they're the ones helping develop the B-Wing. It's a great adventure. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it.
Yeah,
let's
we've
got other things to talk about.
Star Wars in general.
Again, we got to get off the topic of Star Wars, otherwise we'll keep talking about it. So other things that you can combine fantasy with. Honestly, I think one of the best genres to sort of salt into fantasy in small to large doses is actually horror.
Mm.
Because there are enough things that go bump in the night in most fantasy genres that while there's a lot of weird stuff out there, you can do stuff that that the players aren't expecting. And as long as you get the atmosphere right, it'll actually be a horror game. But it's set in a fantasy world.
It's all about like we said last week, it's all about atmosphere with horror.
Yeah, horror is all about the atmosphere and, denying the players information. They should never see the monster, until, the final confrontation. You hint at stuff. You give them, signs of something bad having happened. and so on. Um, and so and much like the game, the sci-fi, the adventure that we talked about a couple episodes ago, where
Yeah,
I
right,
dropped
right.
the sci-fi adventure, we dropped that. That was an example of combining sci-fi and horror.
A really fun one to combine with horror is westerns, and again, this is purely from my experience with Deadlands.
Oh, absolutely. Starting with the Western genre and throwing horror on top of it, absolutely fucking brilliant. I wish I'd thought of it at some point. I've never
Yeah,
done it, and
it's a really good idea.
I never thought of it. Then I saw Deadlands and said, "Damn it! Why didn't I think of that at some point? That'd have been cool."
Damn your hide, game developers, whose names I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another one. Let's. Can you think of any others? Actually, so can you think of any other genres that might be interesting to combine with fantasy? Is the thing, Eric? I've got one, but I want to see if you think of something.
Does steampunk count as its own genre now? I mean,
I think steampunk is its own genre the same way space opera is.
okay, because steampunk actually combines relatively well with fantasy as long as you do it right.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, steampunk is almost an amalgam of cyberpunk and fantasy,
Right.
but it's different.
It's very different from, say, Shadowrun.
Right, exactly. Um, but so, I think that's actually an interesting one. And, I mean, obviously combining fantasy with steampunk gets you things like Eberron and
Iron Kingdoms.
Iron Kingdoms, both of which are freaking cool.
I don't know a lot about Eberron because I'm a bad gamer, but Iron Kingdoms I know inside and out.
Yeah, you're not a bad gamer. You just haven't happened to play Eberron.
But it was everywhere briefly.
Yeah, it was. I should loan you the Eberron player book at some point for 4th Ed. It's a fun read. It also involves, I believe, halflings who ride. Is it someone rides dinosaurs? I forget who.
Someone rides dinosaurs? I am playing that race and riding a dinosaur. As long as it's not halflings.
And one of the player races are drow, and they're not like they're not. It's not like weird because it's just there's this weird guild thing that goes on, and drow are perfectly okay. It's interesting.
Huh, okay.
It's a different take on the drow, basically.
It's not your standard Forgotten Realms transplanted drow.
Yeah.
Watch us twirl our mustaches.
All right,
Only
so
we
Eric,
can grow out of all the elven races because we're evil. We need something to twirl.
exactly. So Eric, you ready to be surprised by my suggestion?
If you say romantic comedy and fantasy, I will kick you.
No. Superheroes.
Yeah, actually, that could work really well.
Doesn't it, if you think about it? And in fact,
I mean,
a lot of
that's basically Exalted.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of higher level D&D games end up sort of becoming that.
It's true.
So, honestly, I think, and they're obviously superheroes often have this long tradition of having magic in their universes to begin with.
Right.
So, slapping it back into a fantasy setting, is an interesting little twist.
Yeah, just knock it back to 1035 instead of contemporary.
Exactly.
The 40s, yeah.
Or even just put it in a fantasy world, and you have, the player characters are the chosen are basically the ones who have who are better than normal. You got the fighter. Your fighter is basically sort of your Captain America or Captain America analog. The thief is sort of the Batman analog. The wizard's your classic flying wizard, and things like that.
The wizard, your Dr. Fate, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you've got it works surprisingly well. And you just have to take a certain.
The priest is your invisible woman.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, see?
All right. Yeah, I dig it.
I've never done it, but I've thought about doing it once or twice. I thought it'd be kind of interesting. The other sort of combo that happens that I've done is sort of adding in elements of sort of Hong Kong style action movies and such into
Here's the
fantasy.
thing. Hong Kong action movies are sort of a genre that goes with all genres.
Exactly. That's part of the reason why. I mean, if you go way back, I mean, if you look at there's a bunch of the older Hong Kong movies which involve magic and crazy weird shit because they got weird. Warriors of Zhu Mountain, Chinese Ghost Story.
Chinese Ghost Story.
Fucking awesome. Great
Yeah.
movie. So those salt in pretty well too. I mean, honestly, that's another one you could probably do a 50-50 blend and just honestly, you could go either way with that one. You basically take
Yeah.
a Hong Kong setting and just slap fantasy into it, or vice versa.
Mm.
Like you could run sort of like a feng shui game where orcs and kobolds and stuff like that exist.
Yeah, or you could. Yeah, it works really well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised. You could also just do Hong Kong action plus horror, in which case you're fighting some Cthulhuid monstrosity and its minions trying to
Yes,
uncover the mystery.
exactly. Oh,
Except it's not really all that horrific when you end up kicking the elder thing back into the abyss.
well, no. If it's a
But
true Hong Kong movie, if it's a true Hong Kong action movie, the player, most of the player characters will die horribly in the final fight with the main bad guy, with one person limping out, barely sane and alive.
okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
There's a lot of tragedy at the end of a lot of Hong Kong movies. Uh,
the one with the spikiest hair will survive if this was done by Japan.
I mean, I remember there's a Jackie. They made a sequel to Bruce Lee's The Chinese Connection with Jackie Chan.
Oh yeah.
And at the end, Jackie and his buddies emerge from the mines, having defeated, the bad guy, defeated the people they were fighting and such, and are confronted by the Japanese army, who gunned them all down. At the end.
Ah, I love that ending.
If you've seen the Chinese Connection, you know that there's a whole conflict between Japan and China going on during this period.
Right.
So it makes complete sense. It's just sort of, hey, we want it dead. What? What?
Oh.
For Western audiences, I've showed this to people. They go, wait, what just happened? Did they all just get gunned down? Yes. That doesn't happen in movies. Have you seen The Great Escape?
Yeah. Seriously.
Some people survive The Great Escape, but not many. It's another good movie. So, anyways,
Dirty Dozen.
yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Everyone dies in the Dirty Dozen.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think it covers most of the things you can combine with fantasy. I mean, you can combine anything with anything, but those are
Right.
sort of the big obvious ones that sort of leap to mind. So I mean, you can do other interesting things. I mean, honestly, at this point, this isn't going to be a very structured show, just as a aside to people, because this is sort of one
When
of those.
are we ever?
This is going to be less structured than usual.
Right. Because we really are bouncing all over the place today.
Yeah, I often come into it with like a little list of topics I want to make sure to touch on, but today I think it's a good time to just sort of flow back and forth on ideas, because that's sort of what we're talking about here, is coming up with ideas and brainstorming at its core in many ways. So Darfold just brought up a brilliant point in the chat here. Golems are the fantasy excuse for robots. I mean, they really are.
Damn straight. They really are. Usually these scary, big, killbot kind of robots.
But then you got the Warforged also from Eberron, who are...
Right. Who are more like...
the golem, actually the sentient golems from Discworld, really.
I was actually going to give them more of the sort of Asimovian robots.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, actually, you're right. They're more like that. You're right.
As opposed to 1950s unstoppable killbot robots.
Which are things like the Iron Golem, which will kill
Right.
you dead.
And let's face facts, the flesh golem is totally Frankenstein.
Yes. And yes, Peter Shaw, Plug One, my friend Peter in the chat, just mentioned, my favorite inversion of a great quote: "Sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology."
Mm.
Because Asimov's favorite: sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
What is that, Asimov?
That was Asimov, yeah.
Okay.
Asimov continuing to be awesome.
Because he's Asimov, or was Asimov.
Yeah. So I mean, combining genres, it's honestly, it's sort of an art form. I mean, it's not really an art. It's more of a, it's not. There's no hard and fast rules to it, is what I'm trying to say.
It's true. You really sort of throw shit in a blender and see what works.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, one can expect that you will have had experience know the ratios that may or may not work. But if you don't, well, congratulations, it's time to experiment.
Exactly. So I mean, there are a lot of things that you wouldn't think combine well that actually do, and I think part of the key is to know sort of the basic sort of nuts and bolts and cliches and tropes of particular genres, so you know what you can pull from where. And I think part of the way you can sort of figure that out isn't just by playing. It goes back to what I said back in my
Oh
GMing
no, it's
101
all
thing.
about like reading also,
Reading, watching
TV.
movies, watching TV, mind fiction for ideas.
Um, Firefly is probably the best example of a space western.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. I mean,
It's a space western. And it's an excellent example of it.
yep, it's one of the best. Absolutely. God, I mean, there's.
Um,
I'm trying to think of other good combos that sort of leap to mind.
Again, I'm jumping back to horror, but a detective story and horror go really well together.
Well, that's sort of almost the core of Call of Cthulhu, really, at its heart.
Yeah, really.
Ryu Planeswalker brought up a brilliant point, and he's right. Outlaw Star basically is feng shui in space.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it totally is.
It really, that's another combo that works completely brilliantly and is awesome. Now I almost want to run that. I mean, it wouldn't be the Outlaw Star universe per se, but I would steal elements from it left and right. Because Outlaw Star is awesome.
Yes. Ooh, maybe I could be the wilting flower in a bottle. Like, what's her face from Outlaw Star?
What, you actually want to be Melfina?
Yeah, because I...
Wait, Eric, wait, what have you done with Eric, and who are you, and what have you done with Eric?
Well, I was originally thinking about playing the Katarl and annoying everyone, but... I don't know, I've never played, like, the kind of wilting flower wine fest that, like that.
Well, Melfina doesn't really whine.
Oh, she's totally a wine fest. Are you kidding?
Not really. Go watch it again.
All right.
I mean, she gets a little whiny at times, but But I mean, ignoring that, I mean, it's got all the great sort of Hong Kong insanity in it. I mean, you've got the Taoist wizards, the caster guns, the grappler ships,
Which are freaking awesome.
spaceships that are punching each other. What?
It's the best thing ever. Oh, we
It's
did
great.
dinosaurs.
It's great, but it's like, wait, what? Really?
Nazi dinosaurs. That way we can punch them and then ride them.
Oh, well, there's another sort of classic combo, actually. Sort of your classic Lost World scenario plugged into a lot of different things, like,
Oh, yeah.
fantasy that's obvious. But I mean, you could plug that in almost anywhere. I mean,
Or sci-fi is another obvious.
Well, yeah, it's almost a trope in sci-fi.
Right.
It's like, oh, hey, look, we found a planet with dinosaur type things on it. Woo! Who would have thunk?
But, like, say, take your World War II Supers game and throw dinosaurs in there. That's awesome. And I'm sure someone's already done it, but now I want to do it.
Damn. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, because then you can have Nazi dinosaurs to punch.
Yeah. I was just thinking that almost exact same thing. The good guys,
With little red armbands on them. Come on, it'd be great.
The heroes, the heroes are the superheroes, and the Nazis have brought back dinosaurs and have modified them and stuff. Oh no, King Waza, the game exists. You're thinking of what's the name of that game, Eric? You bought it.
What game?
The video game.
The idea of a fantasy world where...
No, not fantasy. Nazi, World War II, dinosaurs.
Oh, Dino D-Day.
Dino D-Day.
It's
like that, except
it's
like that, except that you add in superheroes.
Yeah. It's true. It's Dino D-Day isn't a very good game, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ryu Planeswalker. Yeah, exactly. Ryu Planeswalker. Captain America versus a T-Rex clone with Hitler's brain inside it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Or you could do something with Nazis and Mecha.
Oh yeah, well that
you do totally the Japanese Sentai team, but they have to fight Hitler's brain, which is inside Godzilla.
Absolutely. as you can see, just spitballing random ideas, you start getting crazy shit that might be really freaking awesome. I mean, honestly, like if you harken back, Spoonie when he reviewed Ultima One, he was talking
Oh
about the
yeah,
complete insanity that is Ultima One. When you realize that
the Kilrathi spaceship in the field.
that you've got that it's a fantasy world, except that you can buy a space shuttle where you go up into space and fight TIE fighters, and there's Doctor Who's time machine, and all of it's thrown into a blender and pushed frappe. I mean, it's like, wait, what? And apparently this is all loosely based on Garriott's home D&D game.
It sounds like someone's home D&D game.
And it sounds awesome.
Let's go steal the TARDIS.
Wait, what? I mean, so you combine it really honestly, you look at disparate elements that you do not think would work and say, you know what? What the hell? Let's throw it in there and see if it works. And sometimes you'll get, things that don't work because occasionally they just no.
They just don't work, right?
And you know what? You laugh, you shrug it off, and try something else. I mean, here's my biggest tip for actually doing this. Honestly, is let your players know you're trying something experimental, and that you're doing this interesting, wacky thing. And you say, this is what we're going to try, and we'll see how well it works. If it gets too silly or too lame, we'll wrap it up and we'll try something more normal next time. But I have a crazy idea. Let's try it out.
Something I can think of that you would have to work really hard to make it work at all is superheroes and zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done.
You have to try really hard.
You could do it. The problem is it lacks some of the actual impact. I mean,
right.
Well, actually, to a degree, the thing is that the threat at that point isn't so much to you the players.
It's to all the other normals.
Right. To the civilians.
But the whole point of the zombie apocalypse genre unto itself, and let's face facts, it's a genre at this point, is that the personal horror involved. When you've got iron hard skin and shoot lasers out of your eyes, you're not too worried about getting bit by a zombie and becoming one. Because that's why zombies are scary. They make you into them.
Yeah. That said, I mean, there are ways you can handle that. I mean, but it definitely takes...
you could do it, but it's really hard to do properly.
I think so. I mean, Marvel kind of tried that with the Marvel Zombies thing.
Yeah, but that was done almost entirely for comedic value.
Yep. And that's, honestly, you're better off. You want to do sort of a zombie apocalypse type thing. You probably wouldn't do it with actual zombies. You do it things like puppeteers.
Yeah. That makes a lot more sense using.
So it's instead of
head crabs, that kind of shit.
Yeah, head crabs, that type of deal. Starro.
Yeah.
I mean, Starro actually really is the zombie apocalypse in a superhero world, except different. Except that instead of zombies, it's starfish from space. Psychic starfish from space. The 60s were weird, man.
The 60s were very weird.
As much as I love the Silver Age, what the fuck? I love the Silver Age. I love Silver Age comic books to death. I do. And I love the wacky weirdness. But sometimes you look and you go, what the hell? I mean, I love Jack Kirby. I love to death. But
that man was fucking on something every moment he was conscious.
Oh my god. The New Gods is incredible. But the Black Racer is fucked up. It's death, except he's on skis.
For some reason.
Rocket skis. And all black. That's
so
death.
So I'm a surfer. Galactus needed a herald, so I figured I'd draw a naked metal guy on a surfboard.
What? And the thing is, like, he's been around long enough that people don't blink at it. But if you actually think about the Silver Surfer, you go, What? And weirdly enough, that's almost in some ways... No, it's not really a genre combination. I was trying to sell it as one, then I just it's like, no, not really.
No, it doesn't really work.
No. But it's weird. And it's an example of combining two disparate elements that don't make sense and still having it work somehow. Because the concept of having a naked dude made out of metal on a surfboard in a superhero universe is stupid.
It's why did you think this is a good idea, Jack? I can make it work. We don't believe you, Jack. Give me 5 years, I'll make it work. He made it work.
It turns out that the character's written well and is put in a good enough story. People will eventually go, you know what? Whatever. And it's not like Silver Surfer's the weirdest guy in Marvel. I mean,
No.
he's high on the list, but
Rocket Raccoon's still one of my favorites for a complete, like, what the fuck?
yeah, well, the entire DC, the entire Legion of Superheroes. I mean,
Yeah.
these are a bunch of people with really, really lame superpowers.
Matter Eater Lad.
That will be the one that leaps to mind, yes.
Well, there was Bouncing Boy also. He could bounce.
Yep. Yeah.
We're just
Green
going to end
Man.
up talking about comics to combining RPG genres, aren't
Well,
we?
no. I mean, we can move on from there. I mean, the big thing is that, honestly, the reason we're talking about comic books is it's in many ways one of the easiest way, a great genre to basically start with and then add weird things in add elements in from other genres and have it work.
Because a lot of it's already been done before, and if you look hard enough, you can find an example and draw from that.
Exactly. I mean,
Thank you, Silver Age.
Thank you, Silver Age. I mean, honestly, sci-fi and superheroes, no problem, happens all the time. Fantasy into
Fantasy and
superheroes,
no problem, happens all the time.
giant dinosaur, yeah. Kaiju, yep.
Robot invasion,
Yep.
been done.
The Wild West, yep. Thursday. I mean, essentially
World
the
War
entire
II,
cast.
got the entire log of the 40s from DC and Marvel.
The Greek gods. Hey, look, there's Hercules. The Norse gods, Thor. What?
I don't think they've done a lot with the African gods.
Anasazi popped up in something. I know that.
I know he's popped up in a couple Sandman stories.
Exactly.
But I wouldn't necessarily call Sandman superhero.
No, but I think he's popped up in Marvel also.
Okay.
I remember him
That
popping
actually wouldn't surprise me at all because it would be really easy to connect him to Spider-Man.
But I think that's who it was. He popped up in reaction alongside.
Oh, okay. That does make sense.
Rio Planeswalker brought up a good one. If you want to bring more anime into this, One Piece is a brilliant example of combining comic book superheroes with, Western walking the earth and pirates.
I'll have to actually sit down and watch some.
Okay, if you want to watch One Piece, Eric.
I need to watch it in the Japanese because
Yes.
the 4Kids dub is a 4Kids dub.
It's a 4Kids. It's a bad 4Kids dub. 4Kids dub. Oh my God! And you will have to get. It will take, if you can get used to the character designs. It'll take a little while for some of them. But once you get used to the fact that some of the characters are going to look very silly and strange, it's actually pretty awesome.
I really liked Flapjack. I don't think it's going to be difficult for me to get over the character.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, honestly, combining, mythology mixes into superheroes. Mythology mixes into everything. I mean, obviously.
Mm-hmm. It's a little tougher to do with hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
You could do it, but
It'll get weird.
it'll get weird. I mean, look at Stargate.
Well,
It got weird.
honestly, I was thinking Lord of Light, Zelazny's magnum opus,
Oh, right.
which is basically a sci-fi retelling of the Bodhisattva.
Yeah.
It's fucking awesome.
Need to reread it sometime. I haven't read it since high school. I remember very little about it.
I will say this to the chat. If you have not read Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light, if you can find a copy of it, do it. It's an amazing book. Okay.
My initial thought would be the internet or your local library so that you can pay for it or support your local library. Failing that, you can almost certainly pirate it somewhere.
It's really freaking good. I got a copy off of eBay for a mutual friend of ours for Christmas one year, and he absolutely adored it. I got it for Roach a few years back.
Oh, right.
Anyways, out of curiosity, Eric, are there any other sort of published games that you can think of off the top of your head that do sort of that whole genre combining thing?
Um, Star Wars. I already talked about Shadowrun, which I really can't talk about enough because I really like the world of Shadowrun. They have an entire alternate history going on that starts around the late 90s that explains why there's magic, why you've got orcs and elves and shit running around. It explains the advancement of technology in conjunction with magic. It's really kind of cool. I mean, seriously, just sit down and read the world up from the background stuff in a Shadowrun book, and it'll be pretty awesome. Um, Other obvious ones, Deadlands does horror and westerns really well. It's there's Deadlands also has sort of a companion game called Deadlands: The Wasted West, which is a post-apocalyptic western horror movie or game.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
it's kind of brilliant. I've never had an opportunity to play it, but I've got the book hiding somewhere, and it's kind of brilliant.
that's awesome. Actually, speaking of post-apocalyptic, that reminds me of a very early genre combination, Gamma World,
Oh yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah,
post-apocalyptic combined with fantasy, basically. I mean, it's D&D in post-apocalyptic, you know, in the post-apocalypse.
yeah,
And similarly, at the same time, Dark Sun's another one. It's even more fantasy. It's more of
yeah.
an even blend.
Dark Sun's got more fantasy than your traditional Mad Max post-apocalypse
Well, yeah, exactly. It's basically
or
half
Boy and His
fantasy.
Dog or insert favored post-apocalyptic story here.
Yep. And it does a really good job of it. I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of Dark Sun.
I
Actually,
like Dark Sun. I like
I
Dark Sun.
actually
It's a
like Gamma
little
World better. I think it's. I think that adds a needed dose of silliness.
okay, fair enough. Yeah,
It's a little bit. It's more over the top. Um,
there's something to be said about realizing that things need a little comedy and just going bonkers.
yeah.
I mean, that's largely why 40K keeps the orcs around.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, yeah, I mean, so that's another classic one. Those two both.
Yeah.
The classic fantasy horror combination is D&D's Ravenloft.
Yep. 40K actually could almost be argued to be a mashup.
Yeah, it is.
It's a post-apocalyptic, far future fantasy zaniness
Yeah, it's weird.
and dark, darkety dark, dark, dark. So dark so dark the other emotions that are dark cannot escape its the pull of its darky dark,
Yeah.
which is fun because I do play with it.
Um,
um, Fantasy Warhammer Fantasy used to play with some sci-fi
it
elements
did.
way, way, way back in the day. Because the theory was they're both existing in the same universe. As Warhammer Fantasy was in the sort of locked world that no one could get to. Um, but they've largely written a lot of that stuff out.
Yep. And probably for the better for the fantasy battle world.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than like fighting a chaos army and finding out the champion's got a friggin' heavy bolter.
Or a plasma gun.
Oh yeah, yeah, the plasma gun. I remember that.
Let's see. So yeah, I
Hey
think you
there.
guys are getting. I think that we've sort of given a good feel for the insanity and diversity that you can get from combining genres. I mean, there's a host of stuff that you can do. That I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean and it's hard to do properly. But there's not much advice we can give other than experiment and see what works.
yeah, and the other thing is that doing it properly will vary by different people's experiences
Mm,
because I mean there are combinations that will work for some people that will not work for someone else.
this is true. I
And sometimes
mean,
it's because, someone really, really likes pure hard sci-fi and hates seeing it sullied with anything else.
this canon does happen. Or trying to introduce horror in with a group that's just not very good at leaving out player knowledge,
Right, exactly.
because that will almost certainly completely destroy any attempts at horror, unless they're really, really good at throwing something they've never seen before at them.
Yep. Um,
Good luck with that.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, honestly, you can take almost any game and add in elements from, like, you can take almost any published game and add in elements of other genres into it.
Yeah.
Um, to go back and to do my usual sort of toot the horn of Hero System and GURPS. This is not really tooting the system at this point. This is actually talking about some of their other stuff that they do. Um, they both have both GURPS and Hero System publish genre books like
Mm.
GURPS Space, GURPS Sci-Fi, or Hero Space Hero, uh, GURPS
GURPS
Fantasy, Fantasy
Mecha.
Hero, etc. And in almost all of these books, they have a section in there where they talk about combining the genre that the book is talking about with elements from other genres. Because these are universal systems, they're acknowledging that that players that some people will want to take advantage of that. And almost all of these books will have little segments in there, like little sometimes one paragraph, sometimes two, 3 or 4 paragraphs, talking about ways you can combine them and interesting stuff that you can do with them. So if you actually get your mitts on one of those books and just sort of thumb through them, they're worth the read, even if you aren't planning on running the system. Just because both those books do both the Hero System and the GURPS books do a very, very good job of talking about the genre you're trying to that the book is supporting, and talking about the conventions behind it. They talk about the source material. They'll give you references to books you could read, movies you could watch, TV series you could watch, radio programs you could listen to, and so on.
Oh, White Wolf does the same thing.
Yes, they do.
With references to reading material and shows, which is something most game systems should do. Honestly,
I agree.
not nearly enough of them do it. Um, Although I am reminded of a Something Positive comic. Something Positive is a webcomic for those that don't know,
Hmm.
from years and years, thousands of years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, where they were playing in a vampire game, and it had someone who pretty much said, "We're playing GURPS Vampire. Feel free to grab whatever you want out of the other GURPS books." And a conflict occurred between the players when it actually broke out into combat. And one of them turns out to have the chainsaw implant in their concealed cyber arm from Chromebook 4 from Cyberpunk, because GURPS did Cyberpunk, and I believe they converted most of the Chromebooks, which are old splat books from Cyberpunk, over to GURPS also.
Yep. So yeah, that was actually very funny, and actually is an interesting combination is adding in cyberpunk into vampire.
Yeah, because it makes sense. They're dead. They don't have to worry about tissue rejection.
Exactly. It's one of those, I hadn't thought of that. And that's another little combo that just sort of popped in my head is taking cyberpunk and throwing in horror.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's been done before.
Oh, sure.
Almost certainly. I'm sure there's some published stuff out there that mixes cyberpunk with Call of Cthulhu, or
I think there is. I
you know
can't
what?
remember the name of it off the top of my head,
Now
but
that I've actually come out and said it, I seem to remember cover art for something like that back in the old Move.
yeah, I do too. I can't remember the name of the book, but I'm positive that there's actually a
I
cyber.
want to say it was GURPS Cthulhu Punk,
It
because
was.
that sounds
It
like
was.
something they
It
would call
was.
it.
GURPS Cthulhu Punk. That's right. GURPS Cthulhu Punk. It exists,
Which I remember looking at and thinking that's dumb.
but in retrospect,
It's kind of awesome.
uh-huh. It's like one of those. Wow, that's actually probably better than I thought it was.
Yeah. And almost certainly out of print and hard to find now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was back towards the waning days of Cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even think you can find a copy of Cyberpunk 2020 out there anymore.
Probably not. I think I still have a copy of it somewhere. I bought it at
I
one
know
point.
I've got a copy, but I don't think you can find, like, a new copy. I don't think it's being supported by anyone anymore.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
it's
so either.
dead.
Yeah, I picked up a copy of. I don't know if R. Telsorian's still in existence.
Or if someone's picked up the property since then.
Yeah,
The same way, say, Catalyst did with BattleTech.
yeah.
Or
It wouldn't surprise me if there was still a GURPS Cyberpunk book out there in publish, because GURPS does that.
Right.
But yeah, yeah. Clark one in the chat does mentions that Catalyst Games did launch Cthulhu Tech in 2009.
Did they?
Uh huh.
Does this mean I could take my Atlas up against a great old one and punch it in the head?
I have no
Or
idea.
better yet, combine my Atlas with an army of Shoggoths so I can open my leg doors and pour out sentient protoplasm to destroy my enemies. Oh, yes. It'll be like in that terrible Terminator movie where the giant robot had motorcycles in its pants.
I'm so glad I didn't see that movie. All right, I think that covers pretty much what we want to talk about today in terms of combining genres. So at this point, we didn't get any emails from the viewers this week, but we'll throw if the chat has any questions, we'd be more than happy to take questions from the chat tonight. So as usual, if you got anything, please throw it out to us. We're ready to answer questions. And now we wait a moment.
Wait a minute, someone's doing a Cyberpunk 2020 video game?
Yes, they are.
That is awesome.
Okay, Kaz from the chat asks, hey, what do you think a good system for small groups, like 2 players plus a game master?
I'd hate to say it, but the White Wolf system is actually built on the idea of very small groups.
They
Not
are
very fond of the White Wolf system, but it is built for small groups.
Yep. Honestly, I mean, off the top of my head, they're the 3 obvious answers that you will hear from me all the time.
GURPS,
Feng Shui,
Heroes,
GURPS,
Feng
Hero
Shui.
System.
Yeah.
I mean, they all work fine. Other games that work pretty well.
The Fantasy Flight games seem to work pretty well with small groups.
Yeah.
I can only really attest that for Dark Heresy, but yeah.
Honestly, actually, off the top of my head,
anything that doesn't require the holy trinity of priest, fighter, mage.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, Call of Cthulhu works with small groups.
Call of Cthulhu actually works better with small groups.
Yeah. I had one that I just forgot.
Cyberpunk or Shadowrun both work well with small groups.
Yeah, actually,
both of those games, it's entirely possible for you to play multiple characters and simply trade between them between various jobs.
Yeah, Clark one in the chat mentions one of the ones I was about to suggest. That was the one I was forgetting. The James Bond 007 RPG is almost designed for small groups.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, any spy game will work.
Any spy game work great.
So yeah, those all
Which is
work.
kind of the reason why Cyberpunk and Shadowrun work well with small groups.
Exactly.
You're doing a lot of the sort of same spy stuff.
Exactly. There's a combo. Mission Impossible and Shadowrun.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I mean, that's
do. This is the whole time you're watching a troll sneak. Do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's I mean, a lot of Shadowrun games end up basically playing a bit like Mission Impossible because everyone's sort of a specialist.
Mm.
But as a framing conceit for a Shadowrun game, I think that'd be actually really cool.
Yeah.
This message will mutate into a demon in 15 seconds. All right, so let's see. We've got another question here. Is GURPS a system that works for everything? Is GURPS a system that works for everything? It can
almost asterisks maybe.
Yeah, you can do anything in GURPS, pretty much. It does certain things better than it does other things. Anything where the character's skills are paramount, GURPS does very well.
Yes. Anything where lethality is expected, GURPS does pretty well.
Yep. You know, pretty much anything from sort of the modern era on, GURPS handles well. Anything that's sort of quasi-realistic, that has sort of a basing in reality. It does.
I have no idea how they do for mecha games.
I don't either off the top of my head. I've never actually done it. There's a
Yeah,
GURPS Mecha book.
my
I own
go-to
it.
game for mecha is actually DreamPod 9's Heavy Gear. So, but which I think has a new edition out.
Oh, cool. So yeah, those GURPS does that sort of stuff well. It does sort of gritty low fantasy very well.
Hmm.
It can do sort of middling to high fantasy okay. It does superheroes. It does low power superheroes well.
It does your Batmans and
Yes.
Spider-Mans and
Sort of street level
Daredevil
heroes.
as well. It
It'll do
does
street
do
level
your
heroes.
yeah.
Street level heroes who spend most of their time fighting guys who don't have superpowers. Does that well. 20s era pulp.
Yeah, actually.
Um, Zero Awakening asks, what is low fantasy? We talked about this a little bit last week. Basic low fantasy is usually refers to the level of magic in the world.
Right.
Things like Song of Fire and Ice.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say the Game of Thrones series is really good for a really good example of low fantasy.
Most of the classic Conan stories.
Yep, Conan works excellent. Is definitely low fantasy.
There's a bunch of it.
I'm totally brain farting. There's a gajillion tons of it, but the idea is low magic.
Not much in the way of non-human races.
Although you will run into them occasionally.
But yeah, they're not like it's not like classic D&D where there are a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And they're not common usually.
High lethality is often a common factor in low fantasy.
Yep.
I mean, again, look at Game of Thrones. How many people die?
Everybody. That's another. Yeah, exactly. It was a part of it is that you really can't heal through magic very well. So
yeah, because it may not even exist.
right, and usually if magic exists, it's either unreliable or dangerous.
Yeah.
Or there's something shady about it, etc.
Or you're paying a pretty hefty price to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of what low fantasy is. I mean, as I said, we touched on it a bit last week, but reinforcing it now is probably a good point.
Darkvault points out, asks, what about authentic no magic medieval games? I'd say that's more historical role-playing in a medieval era.
Yeah, and GURPS does that well. Again, GURPS handles that sort of thing pretty well. So let's see. Anything else? Any other questions, guys? Or did I miss one?
I don't know.
Selfie asks, have you ever played any foreign tabletop games? For example, one originally published in Europe or Asia?
I honestly could not say. I want to say yes, simply by volume. It's likely I've done so, but I honestly rarely pay attention to where it's actually from.
Yeah, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. The only one I know for a fact that I've played that was not originally written in the United States was Ars Magica, which is originally published by Lion Rampart Games, which is from the UK.
Right.
Warhammer Fantasy also.
Oh yeah.
It was originally a UK game also.
I've played Confrontation, which is originally, I think, a German game.
French.
That's also a French game. That's a tabletop war game.
Robin Laws is Canadian, yes, Peter Shaw, but the rest of the Feng Shui crew are from the U.S. So, I'm sure there are other games that
There's
I've played.
got to be stuff out there, yeah.
I know.
Wait a minute. Does anything by Games Workshop count?
I mean, Games Workshop. We've both played a bunch of Games Workshop games, so yeah. I mean, but not we. I haven't played a lot of GW. GW hasn't done a lot of RPGs as a thing, so.
Yeah, I mean, they usually ship that out to other game companies, which may or may not be from the UK. Honestly, couldn't tell you where your Fantasy Flight or whoever did.
Fantasy Flight now is based in the US. I know that. But.
Okay, I honestly couldn't tell you who did the original Warhammer Fantasy or where they're based out of.
Yeah, I do know that I mean, there are a few other games I've heard of that are from Europe that I've not played. Both Cult and Chill are from Europe, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Cult's from Europe, and I played that. So yes, you see, just by I could say yes just by volume, and it's something in there would be from Europe. I have never actually knowingly played an Asian game, so because I don't think they get imported a lot.
I don't know of any.
Because yeah, I don't even know how they do tabletop role playing in Asia, or whether they do.
I know they do. There are several anime.
They must. It's
I know for a fact that both Record of Lodoss War and the Slayers were both heavily influenced by the original creators' D&D games.
You know what? I could totally. You know what? I remember watching Record of Lodoss Wars and going, "Holy shit! This is totally my D&D game."
It is. So yeah, I think that's sort of we've played them because we both played a whole bunch of RPGs, but honestly, I couldn't if you were outside of most of the outside the fact that I know most of them are originally from the United States, I couldn't tell you where most of them are made.
Yeah, seriously, I honestly could not tell you, yay or nay. I will say yes simply by volume.
Yeah. So and we've both found at least one that we know for a fact is from outside the U.S. that we've played. So yeah, any other questions? We got time for maybe one or two more. Don't want to leave too much dead air, but
Come on, humans, ask a question.
Yes.
Everyone loves Slayers. Slayers is awesome. If you don't like Slayers, then you're a commie, fascist, space bad person, mutant.
Yeah. Or I know people who don't like Slayers.
And they're all bad people. I know, I'm friends with some of them.
Recommended setting the DM in. Start out DMing in. Kerned. Honestly,
anything you've played a lot.
Basically, genres that it's not just that you've played a lot, but that helps. But genres know the best. It can be from having played a bunch of RPG set in that genre, or because you read a lot of that genre, or you've watched a lot of TV shows in that genre, or you've watched movies in that genre. Like, if you love science fiction and read a lot of science fiction, have watched a lot of science fiction TV shows and movies, and you know science, sort of the nuts and bolts of what makes science fiction work, that's going to be a genre you'll be able to run well.
I'm going to be a wet blanket and say stay away from horror at first, because horror is really hard to do well as a DM.
That's actually a good caveat. Horror is an extremely difficult genre to GM. Eric's right. I do not recommend running a horror game as a first-time game master, for the very simple reason that you won't be used to knowing how to take advantage of the fact that you are the player's eyes and ears. That's the important thing, and that's sort of how you build that sort of sense of dread, is that you realize that the players only know what you tell them, so you can manipulate what their characters know by telling them what they see and not have it be completely correct.
And letting the players' assumptions run rampant, because they're going to be asking you questions directly. Like, really? Are you sure this is what it is? I don't know. What do you think it is?
And you basically say that, well, this is what you see. How you and your character interpret it is up to you. So,
although I was a big fan of, really, could it be this? And be like, that's a logical assumption.
That's a good one, too. Honestly, as I said, For a newer GM, basically stick with the genres you know and like best, outside of horror.
Oh, and mystery, because mystery has a lot of the same problems that horror
Yeah,
does.
exactly. Yeah. Well, again, throwing mysteries into a game, you could do it eventually, but they almost never work as well as you think they're going to.
I
Just
mean,
again,
there's nothing wrong with throwing a mystery in your basic hack and slash or dungeon crawl. In fact, I encourage it. But having it be the central crux of the game, like say you're doing a Sherlock Holmes type thing or what have you, then that you start running a lot of the same problems as you do with horror.
yep. But that said, if you have your heart set on trying one of those, do it anyways. Just beware that it's going to be harder than you think it is. And
Yeah, I mean, there.
be willing to learn lessons from it.
Yeah, be go in there, give it a shot if you really want to. Be prepared to fail and to learn from that.
Yep. All right.
Well, like anything else, be prepared to fail the first time through and see how and learn from it.
All right. So I guess we got time for one last question, which is asked by Clark One, otherwise known as Peter Shaw. Is there a genre you've wanted to try but haven't yet?
I have not played enough giant robot games,
Hmm.
and I say that because I've played a lot of everything else, but I've only played in 2 or 3 giant robot games.
Honest. As Clark One says, that's why I like you, Eric. Honestly, for me, I've been gaming for so bloody long that at this point, I've tried virtually every sort of basic genre at some point. I guess I haven't played that much sort of Wild West stuff, and I think that'd be kind of interesting. I'm not sure I'd want to run it, but I think I'd like to play in one or two at some point that I've not done. I'd like to play in a spy game also at some point.
I've played it in straight up Wild West. They're not nearly as much fun as say Deadlands or Wild Cyberpunk Wild West or what have you.
Hmm.
Simply because Wild West will usually devolve into everyone being a gunfighter or a lot dog.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's been the last. I mean, I've played a little bit here and there. I played Boot Hill way back in the day, but I don't remember much of it. It was an old TSR game. But yeah, honestly, I guess sort of westerns, no matter how it combines, is basically where I would is the one I haven't played much that I'd like to play more of. I think that's pretty much all the time we have tonight, though. So I think we'll wrap things up now.
Okie
Um,
dokie.
so Eric, before we go, any last thoughts on combining genres that you want to share?
Feel free to experiment. Go nuts. Be crazy. Be prepared to fail and learn from those failures, like anything else. Honestly, whenever I try something new, I go into it expecting to fail the first couple times and just looking to learn from the experience. So.
That's about pretty much the best advice I could give, and I agree with Eric completely on that point. So we don't have a topic yet for next week. We'll come up with something during the week. As usual, if you have comments, questions, feedback, please feel free to leave them in the comment section of anywhere where you find this, or you can always email us at surlygrognards@yahoo.com, surlygrognards@yahoo.com. You can reach me. You can find me on the internet. My Twitter is @MechaGM. You can find me on Google and Facebook, Google Plus and Facebook. Peter Bowman there. Eric has done work. Is the artist for the webcomic Boston Arcanum, which is currently on hiatus until you guys can get your act together.
It should be updating. If it hasn't updated between when we started, then it should be getting updates very soon and like several pages worth.
Nice. So updates coming to Boston Arcanum very soon, guys. That's bostonarcanum.com. I'm Peter Bowman, and for my co-host and good friend Eric Carlson, I wish you all a good night and happy gaming. Say good night, Eric.
Good night, humans.